My husband looked me in the eyes and yelled, "Go to hell with that brat!" But when the judge finished reading the verdict, the entire courtroom fell into a deathly silence. Even John's ridiculously expensive lawyer, in his impeccable $18,000 suit, turned pale. In 22 years of marriage, I had never seen my husband with that expression, half shock, half terror. And for the first time in years, I truly smiled. But before I continue, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching us from? We love to know how far our stories reach. Everything fell apart 3 months ago on a regular Tuesday. I was finishing up dinner when John came home earlier than usual. It was strange. Normally he stayed at the office until 9 o'clock at night, sometimes later. In recent years, we rarely ate dinner together. I remember I was slicing carrots when he walked into the kitchen. "We need to talk, Laura." Something in the coldness of his voice made my stomach drop. I put down the knife, wiped my hands on my apron, and sat at the table. John remained standing, arms crossed, not looking directly at me. "I'm leaving." 2 words, just like that, as if he were telling me he was going to the grocery store. "What?" was all I could say. "I don't want this marriage anymore. It's over. I don't feel what I used to feel. I'm in love with someone else." The world stopped. 22 years of life together, reduced to a few phrases thrown at my face like stones. I looked at the man in front of me, trying to recognize the young man I fell in love with 2 decades ago. I couldn't. "Who is she?" I asked, surprised by the calm in my voice. "Does it matter?" "To me, yes. It matters." He sighed, irritated. "Sophie, my assistant." Of course. The 27-year-old who he had hired 6 months ago. Pretty, with that vibrant energy that I had lost somewhere between raising our son, taking care of the house, and managing the finances for John's construction company during the difficult early years of the business. "John, we have a son. We have a life together. We built all of this." "And you're going to get what you deserve," he interrupted me. "I'll be fair. But my decision is already made." That same night, he packed a suitcase and left. When Sam, our 17-year-old son, arrived home from a friend's house, I had to explain that his father had left us. His look of confusion turned into rage, then into pain. We sat together on the sofa late into the night, in silence. The following days were a blur. John sent his lawyer with the divorce papers. The conditions? I would be left with a minimum alimony and a small apartment on the outskirts of Austin. Everything else, the house where we lived, the construction company, the cars, the savings, everything would stay with him. After all, according to the documents, he was the one who had worked to achieve all of it. I was just a housewife, 22 years of my life erased in an instant, as if I hadn't sacrificed my career so he could build his, as if I hadn't sold my grandmother's jewelry to finance his first venture when we were starting out, as if I hadn't stayed up late, night after night, organizing the accounts, creating spreadsheets, attending to clients while he was out in the field. I consulted 3 different lawyers. They all said the same thing. It would be a difficult battle. Without documented proof of my contribution, with everything in his name, I would probably only receive the minimum. Carol, my best friend since college, was outraged. "You can't accept that. Laura, he would have nothing if it weren't for you." "What can I do? I have no way to prove it," I replied, exhausted. "Hire Amanda Reed," she said with conviction. "She is fierce. I've seen what she does in court. If anyone can help you, it's her." Amanda Reed was known as the lawyer for impossible cases. She didn't have the status or the resources of the firm representing John, but she had something more important, a passion for justice and a razor-sharp intellect. When we met, she didn't give me false hope. "It will be difficult, Mrs. Laura, but we will fight with everything we have." And so began our legal battle. We gathered all possible evidence of my contribution over the years, testimonies from former employees who saw me working in the company, photos from events where I clearly participated as a business partner, not just as John's wife, records of deposits I had made into John's personal account at the beginning of the marriage. Meanwhile, life continued at a strange pace. Sam became withdrawn, dedicating himself to his studies with an almost sickly intensity. John rarely called him. When he tried to visit, Sam refused. The wound was too deep. A month after John left home, I went to the mall and saw her, Sophie, walking hand in hand with him, laughing. She was wearing a bracelet that I immediately recognized. I had seen it in the catalog I left open on the nightstand, a hint for our approaching wedding anniversary. John was never good at choosing gifts alone. It seems he had learned with her. I hid behind a column, feeling my heart break once again. 22 years, replaced in the blink of an eye. That night I cried until I had no more tears. Then I stood up, looked at myself in the mirror, and promised myself I would not be defeated, not after everything I sacrificed. The divorce process moved slowly. John became increasingly aggressive in the negotiations, as if each passing day made him more determined to leave me with nothing. The man who once promised me eternal love now seemed to hate me with the same intensity. "He's scared," Amanda told me one afternoon. "Men like your husband become dangerous when they feel they are losing control." And then, 2 weeks before the final hearing, I received an unexpected phone call, a male voice with a foreign accent. "Mrs. Laura Smith, my name is Robert Martin. I am the executor of your great-uncle Anthony Miller's will." "There must be a mistake," I replied. "I don't have an uncle by that name." "He was your maternal grandmother's brother. He lived most of his life in Boston. He passed away a month ago and left a rather specific will." I vaguely remembered my mother mentioning a great-uncle who had emigrated when he was young. I never met him personally. "And what does that have to do with me?" "Mr. Anthony left his entire fortune to you, madam, the only great-niece." Silence. I couldn't process what I was hearing. "Fortune? What fortune?" "Properties in Boston and Cape Cod, various investments, some shares in companies. The preliminary valuation indicates an estate of approximately $4 million. $4 million. I felt the world spinning. Why? Why me? In his will, Mr. Anthony mentions that 30 years ago, when he visited Austin, you were the only person in the family who received him with genuine affection. You were very young. Perhaps you don't even remember it. And then, like a flash, I remembered. An older gentleman visiting our house when I was about 12 years old. My parents were always busy. They barely had time for him. But I loved listening to his stories about Massachusetts, about the sea and the trips he took. I spent an entire week showing him the city, taking him to the places I thought were beautiful, listening to his advice and adventures. "Mr. Anthony never forgot your kindness," Robert continued. "He followed your life from a distance. He knew about your marriage, the birth of your son. He kept informed through distant relatives. A single week of childhood kindness 3 decades ago, and now this." The documents will be formally presented to the Texas court next week. Since the inheritance was received after the de facto separation, it does not enter into the division of assets in your divorce. It is exclusively yours. When I hung up, I sat on the sofa, stunned. An hour later, Amanda called me, euphoric. "You won't believe it. The Boston lawyer just contacted me. Laura, this changes everything." And it truly did change everything. The morning of the final hearing, the sky was heavy. Heavy clouds foretold a storm, perfectly matching the atmosphere inside the courtroom. My stomach was a knot of anxiety as I adjusted the skirt of my only decent suit, bought years ago for events at John's company, where I appeared as the dedicated wife. Next to me, Amanda maintained her composure, but her eyes shone with fierce determination. Sam had insisted on coming with me, despite my protests. At 17, he looked older, his face hardened by the disappointment with his father. "Mom, I'll be by your side," he told me as we crossed the courthouse doors. Always. Those words were the only comfort I had at that moment. When we entered the room, John was already there, sitting next to his lawyer, Mr. Gregg, a middle-aged man with a reputation for being ruthless in legal circles. And next to John, to my surprise, Sophie. She was wearing a fitted dress, her hair impeccably styled, looking at me with a mix of triumph and disdain. The nerve, I thought, bringing the mistress to the divorce. John didn't look directly at me. In the last 3 months, he had transformed into a complete stranger. The man who for years shared my bed now seemed incapable of holding my gaze for more than 2 seconds. The judge entered. Judge Chloe Roberts, a woman of approximately 60 years old with penetrating eyes and a severe expression. She began the proceedings efficiently, reviewing the facts of the case. Mr. Gregg was the first to speak, presenting his case with arrogant confidence. "Your Honor, the facts are simple. My client, Mr. John Smith, single-handedly built a successful company through his tireless work and entrepreneurial vision. Mrs. Laura, while she was a present wife and mother, did not contribute financially to the acquisition of assets." I felt my blood boil. Amanda squeezed my hand under the table, signaling me to keep calm. "My client's offer is more than generous," he continued. "A 2-bedroom apartment and a monthly alimony adequate to Mrs. Laura's needs. As for Smith Construction, there is no discussion. It was the exclusive result of Mr. John's labor." When Amanda stood up to present our case, her voice was firm and clear. "Your Honor, the version presented by my esteemed colleague is, to say the least, a gross distortion of reality, Mrs. Laura not only supported her husband emotionally throughout all these years, but she was a fundamental part of the company's success. She presented our testimonies, photos, circumstantial evidence of my contribution. As she spoke, I noticed John becoming increasingly restless, furiously whispering with his lawyer. "Furthermore," Amanda continued, "I would like to present a new fact that directly influences this case." It was at that moment that the courtroom door opened and Robert Martin entered, carrying an elegant briefcase. John sharply turned to see who the newcomer was, frowning in confusion. "With your Honor's permission," Amanda said, "I would like to call Mr. Robert Martin, the executor of the will of Mr. Anthony Miller, my client's great-uncle." The judge nodded, and Robert approached, handing official documents to the magistrate. She carefully examined them, her eyebrows raising as she read. "These documents prove that Mrs. Laura Smith is the sole heir to a considerable fortune, valued at approximately $4 million, Robert explained. "The inheritance includes properties in Massachusetts, diversified investments, and company shares, all legally documented, with taxes duly paid." The judge studied the documents for long minutes. The entire courtroom remained in absolute silence. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, the woman who, seconds earlier, was being portrayed as a dependent housewife and now appeared as the heir to a fortune. "I would like to clarify," Amanda added, "that this inheritance was received after the de facto separation. Therefore, it is not part of the assets to be divided in the divorce. It belongs exclusively to my client." That's when it happened. John abruptly stood up, his face contorted in a mix of shock and fury. "This is a farce," he shouted. "She is lying. There is no uncle, there is no inheritance." "Mr. Smith, control yourself," the judge warned severely. But John was beside himself. He pointed a finger at me, shaking with rage. "Take your son out of here and go to hell. This is a setup." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the court clerk stopped typing, his hands suspended over the keyboard. "You miserable traitor!" The words escaped my mouth before I could hold them back. The judge forcefully banged the gavel. "Mr. Smith, one more comment like that, and you will be removed from this courtroom and fined for contempt. Sit down immediately." John sat down, still trembling. Sophie was pale, looking at him as if he were a stranger. Mr. Gregg desperately tried to calm his client, whispering quickly in his ear. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked directly at me. "Mrs. Smith, do you confirm that you are the sole heir of Mr. Anthony Miller, and that this inheritance was received after the couple's de facto separation?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. She nodded, examined the documents again, and then announced, "In view of this new information and the evidence presented by the defense regarding Mrs. Laura's contribution to the building of the family estate, this court determines a recess of 30 minutes so that I can adequately review the case before dictating the verdict." As the judge withdrew, I felt Sam's hand squeeze mine. I looked at my son and saw his eyes were moist, but a small smile was forming on his lips. On the other side of the room, John seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He alternated between staring blankly and shooting me furious glances. Sophie had moved slightly away from him, constantly checking her cell phone, as if looking for an escape route. "Are you okay?" Amanda asked in a low voice. I didn't know how to answer. I was stunned, exhausted, relieved, and terrified at the same time. The last 3 months had been a nightmare, and now suddenly the script had completely changed. "I think so," I managed to say. The recess seemed to last an eternity. Sam went to get me water, while Amanda reviewed her notes. On the other side of the room, John and his lawyer were in a heated discussion. At one point, Sophie abruptly stood up and left the room without looking back. John didn't even seem to notice. When the judge returned, the courtroom was once again silent. She settled into her chair, looked at both sides, and began to speak. "This court has carefully analyzed all the evidence presented. It is evident that Mrs. Laura Smith contributed significantly to the building of the family estate, not only through domestic work and raising the child, but also with direct participation in the couple's businesses, especially in the initial years." John shifted in his seat, but remained silent. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "Mr. John Smith's behavior during this process demonstrates a lack of respect not only for his ex-wife, but also for this court." She paused as if carefully choosing her next words. "Therefore, I determined the division of assets in the following manner. Smith Construction will be divided in a proportion of 60% for Mr. John and 40% for Mrs. Laura, thereby recognizing her contribution. The main house will remain with Mrs. Laura, where she can reside with her minor son. The remaining assets will be divided equally." The courtroom fell into a profound silence. The judge continued, her firm voice resonating through the room. "As for the inheritance received by Mrs. Laura, as it was acquired after the de facto separation, it does not integrate the division of assets and belongs exclusively to her." I looked at John. His face had lost all color. The man who for years made me feel small and invisible now looked diminished, cornered. "Furthermore," the judge proceeded, "considering Mr. Smith's inappropriate behavior during these hearings, he will be responsible for all court costs and attorney fees." She banged the gavel once, sealing the fate John had traced for himself. "The session is adjourned." Amanda hugged me tightly. "We did it, Laura. We did it." I was still processing what had happened when I noticed John approaching, Mr. Gregg desperately trying to restrain him. Sam instinctively stepped between us. "Better not, Dad," he said with a coldness he had never shown before. John ignored his son, his eyes fixed on me. The hatred was gone, replaced by something even more disturbing, desperation. "Laura," his voice was different, almost pleading. "Can we talk? We need to sort this out like adults. Amanda stepped forward. Any communication with my client must go through my firm, Mr. Smith. That's ridiculous, he exclaimed. 22 years together and now you won't even speak to me? Something broke inside me. 22 years together, and he had thrown everything away as if it meant nothing. We had built a life, a family, and he destroyed it all for a whim. Now you want to talk? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Now? After treating me like trash for months? After trying to leave me with nothing? Now? After not even calling your own son? I made a mistake, he whispered, lowering his voice so only I could hear. Sophie just broke up with me. She said this isn't what she wanted. Laura, please, can we start over? I looked at the man, the same brown eyes that once made me lose sleep, the same smile that won me over. But now all I saw was a stranger. No, John, we can't. I turned and walked out of the courthouse with Sam and Amanda. Outside, the sky had cleared. The threatening storm had given way to a sunny afternoon, a perfect symbol of what I felt. In the following weeks, my life completely transformed. Robert helped me with all the paperwork related to the inheritance. Amanda oversaw the division of assets in the divorce. John tried to contact me several times, but I maintained my distance. It was as if a chapter of my life had finally closed. Sam was lighter. He continued to be dedicated to his studies, but he started smiling again, going out with friends, planning the future. I'm thinking of studying architecture, he told me one night over dinner. I thought you wanted medicine. That was to please Dad, he admitted. Architecture has always been what I wanted. A month after the hearing, Robert invited me to go to Boston to see the properties that now belonged to me. At first, I hesitated. I had never traveled abroad. I had never done anything so grand alone. You should go, Sam insisted. See a bit of the world. You spent so much time taking care of everyone that you forgot to live, Mom. He was right. For years, I lived for others. First John, then Sam, then the company. I always put my needs, my dreams, last. We decided we would make the trip together during the school break. It would be our first great adventure, just the two of us. Before leaving, one last piece of unfinished business needed to be resolved. John had asked that we meet at a neutral coffee shop to talk civilized. Amanda advised me to accept. It was better to keep things friendly, especially for Sam. I chose a crowded coffee shop downtown. I arrived a few minutes early and ordered a cappuccino. John appeared punctually, looking dejected. The elegant suit he used to wear now seemed too big for his body. Thanks for coming, he said, sitting across from me. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. Laura, I know I was wrong. I was selfish, cruel. I have no excuses. I remained silent. What response could I give to that? Sophie, she was only interested in the money. As soon as she realized he would lose a significant part of the company, she disappeared. I ran into her last week with one of our richest clients. I felt a pang of pity, but I was surprised to realize there was no longer any resentment, just a deep indifference. What do you want, John? He took a deep breath. I wanted to know if there's any chance at all, that we can get back together, that we can be a family again. I looked at the man who was once the center of my universe. I remembered the good years, the shared dreams, the struggles and conquests, but I also remembered the ease with which he threw all of that away, the cruelty with which he treated me, the coldness with which he ignored his own son. No, John, we can't. He lowered his eyes. Are you going to sell your share of the company? So that was it. He was worried about the business. I haven't decided yet, I answered honestly. For now, I'll keep my shares. The company is doing well, and it's a good investment. He nodded, looking relieved and disappointed at the same time. And Boston? Are you really going? Yes, Sam and I are leaving next month. We're going to see the properties, spend some time there. Will you move there? I don't know, John. I'm learning not to plan the future so much, to live one day at a time. We finished our coffee in silence. When we said goodbye on the sidewalk, there was a finality to the moment that we both felt. Take care, Laura, he said. You too, John. I walked away without looking back. Part of me was sad, not for the end of the marriage, but for the end of an era, for the dreams that would never come true, for the plans that would never leave the paper. But another part, a part that grew every day, was hopeful. For the first time in decades, my future was mine to mold. I was no longer just John's wife, Sam's mother. I was Laura, a woman with resources, with possibilities, with an entire world to explore. The night before our trip, Sam and I had dinner at home, the same house I almost lost, which was now truly ours. We had redecorated some rooms, changed the arrangement of the furniture, transforming the space into something new. I'm proud of you, Mom, Sam said suddenly, for the way you handled all of this, for how you didn't give up. I smiled at my son, this young man who had become my rock during the most difficult times. I learned that we are stronger than we think, I replied, and that it's never too late to start over. Later, alone in my room, I looked at the half-packed suitcase on the bed. Passport, documents, clothes, everything ready for a journey I never imagined taking. Next to the suitcase, a photo of me when I was 12, with my great-uncle Anthony. I barely remembered that encounter, but apparently that week of childhood kindness had deeply marked the man. Small acts of kindness, I thought. We never know how they come back to us. That night I slept without dreaming, without nightmares, without waking up startled as I had for months. For the first time in a long time, I slept with the certainty that, regardless of what the future held, I would be fine. The next morning, we left for the airport. A new life awaited across the ocean, maybe temporary, maybe permanent. The important thing was that for the first time, the choice was mine. Ready? Sam asked as we boarded. I smiled, squeezing his hand. More than ever. The plane took off, leaving behind the city that had been my home for my entire life. Through the window I saw the clouds, the infinite sky, and felt a freedom I had never experienced before. John had sent me to hell, but instead I found my own paradise. Boston welcomed us with bright sunshine and a deep blue sky I had never seen. The air had a different perfume, a mixture of sea breeze, flowers, and something indefinable that I could only describe as new. Robert Martin was waiting for us at the Boston airport, an elegant man in his 50s with a kind smile and observant eyes. He led us to a gleaming black car where a uniformed driver was already waiting. "Welcome to Massachusetts," Robert said as we settled into the back seat. "Mr. Anthony would be very happy to know that you are finally seeing his properties, Mrs. Laura." It was still strange to hear that, his properties, as if I, a woman from Austin who, until 3 months ago, was fighting not to lose her own house, was suddenly the owner of real estate on another continent. I immediately loved Boston. The old buildings with their colorful facades, the cobblestone streets that went up and down steep hills, the yellow taxis that looked like they were straight out of an old movie. It was like being in another world, another time. Our first stop was an apartment in Beacon Hill, one of the city's most elegant neighborhoods. The 19th century building had a facade of brick and white trim. The doorman greeted us respectfully, as if he already knew who I was. When Robert opened the apartment door, I gasped. It was spacious and bright, with high windows that overlooked a stunning view of the Charles River. The furniture was antique but well preserved, an elegant mix of traditional New England pieces and some more modern items. This was Mr. Anthony's main home for many years, Robert explained as he guided us through the space. He adored this place. He said here he could feel the heart of Boston beating. I walked to one of the windows and watched the city spread out before me, so different from everything I knew, so far from my previous reality. "It's beautiful," I whispered. Sam enthusiastically explored the apartment, opening doors, looking at every detail. "Mom, it has 3 bedrooms, and look at the size of this kitchen." Robert smiled, clearly satisfied with our reaction. "There's more," he said. Mr. Anthony also owned a house in Cape Cod, on the South Shore, a beautiful place to relax, and there's the share in the winery in the Napa Valley region of California. The Napa Valley winery took me by surprise. "A winery? I don't know anything about wine." Robert laughed. "Don't worry. There are competent managers taking care of everything, and have been for years. The winery functions very well, even without the owner's direct supervision. It generates a considerable profit, in fact." In the following days, Robert showed us every property, every investment. The house in Cape Cod was a villa by the sea with white walls and a lush garden. The winery in Napa Valley was located on gentle hills covered with vineyards that descended to the valley in perfectly aligned terraces. In each place, the employees and managers greeted us with respect and curiosity. To them, I was the mysterious great-niece who had inherited everything. I imagine they wondered how an ordinary woman from Austin had suddenly become the owner of a piece of their state. At the winery, the head winemaker, Mr. Phillips, guided us through a tasting while explaining the production process. "This particular wine," he said, offering us a glass of a robust red, "was Mr. Anthony's favorite. It is produced with grapes grown in the oldest vines on the property." I tasted the wine, feeling its complex flavor, the way it evolved in my mouth. I had never been a wine connoisseur. John always chose what we drank, usually to impress his clients, but there was something in that moment that touched my soul. "It's extraordinary," I commented sincerely. Mr. Phillips smiled approvingly. "You have a good palate, just like your uncle." After a week exploring the properties and meeting the people who worked on them, Robert invited us to dinner at his house in Boston. It was an elegant but cozy apartment where his wife, Martha, received us like old friends. During dinner, he handed me a small wooden box. "Mr. Anthony left this specifically for you, to be delivered when you first visited Massachusetts." I opened the box carefully. Inside was an antique gold pocket watch with engraved initials and an envelope. I opened the envelope and found a handwritten letter with elegant but slightly shaky calligraphy. "Dear Laura, if you are reading this letter, it means you have finally seen Boston and the properties that are now yours. I hope you liked what you saw. Perhaps you wonder why I left everything to you, a great niece I barely knew. The answer is simple: because you saw me. When I visited Austin so many years ago, you were the only person who truly saw me as a human being, not just as a distant relative or an obligation. You showed me your city with pride. You told me your dreams. You listened to my stories when everyone else was too busy. For a 12-year-old girl, you demonstrated extraordinary compassion and generosity of spirit. Throughout the years, I followed your life from a distance. I watched you marry, have your son, build a life. I knew about the difficulties you faced. I admired your silent resilience. This watch belonged to my father, your great-grandfather. Wear it as a reminder that time is the only truly valuable commodity we possess. Use it wisely, Laura. Live every moment. Build the life you want, not the one others expect of you. With affection, your Uncle Anthony. Tears ran down my face when I finished reading. Sam, sitting next to me, put his arm around my shoulders. "Are you okay, Mom?" I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Finally, I looked at Robert and Martha. "He really watched me all these years," Robert confirmed.
Mr. Anthony had some distant relatives in Austin who kept him informed. He cared about you very much, although he chose not to intervene directly in your life. He said that each person must forge their own path.
I looked at the watch in my hand, feeling its weight, its history, an object that had crossed generations to reach me. "Thank you for sharing this with me," I said to Robert, "for helping me to know a little more about the man who changed my life without me even knowing it." On the way back to the apartment in Boston, I remained silent, absorbing everything I had experienced, everything I had learned. Sam respected my silence, looking out the window at the city lights passing like shooting stars. "How would you feel if we stayed longer?" I asked suddenly. Sam turned to me surprised. "Like, extend the trip?" "Not just that. I've been thinking, what if we spent a year here? Could you do your senior year of high school at an international school? I could learn to manage the properties, to get to know this place better." Sam was thoughtful for a moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "That would be incredible, Mom. I'd love that." "Are you sure? It would be a huge change. You'd be far from your friends." "Mom," he interrupted gently, "after everything we've been through, I think a change is exactly what we need. Besides, I can keep in touch with my friends online, and it would be a unique experience before college." His enthusiasm was contagious. I felt a wave of gratitude for having such an understanding son, so open to possibilities. The next morning, I discussed the idea with Robert. He didn't seem surprised. In fact, he expected me to consider that possibility. "Mr. Anthony always imagined you might want to build a new life here. He explained that, as an American citizen, I could apply for residency in a foreign country based on my investments there, if I were to consider an international location. But given the context change, the thought remained. Sam could enroll at the international school next semester. As for the properties in Austin, the house and my share in the construction company, they could be managed remotely with the help of reliable professionals." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. We returned to Austin to organize everything, enrolling Sam in a school in Boston, preparing documents for our move, arranging the house. Amanda helped me with the legal part, ensuring that my interests in the construction company were protected while I was away. We hired a property manager to oversee my part of the business. John reacted with disbelief when he learned of our plans. "Boston? Are you really taking our son to another state?" "Yes, John. Sam is excited about the idea. It will be an enriching experience for him before college." "And the construction company? Are you going to abandon the business we built?" That "we" irritated me. After everything he had done, after trying to exclude me completely, now he spoke as if we were partners. "I hired a competent manager to oversee my interests. The company will continue to function normally." He seemed to want to say more but restrained himself. Perhaps he had finally realized that he no longer had the right to question my decisions. Carol was the hardest to convince. My friend of so many years cried when I told her I was leaving. "Who will have coffee with me on Tuesdays? Who will listen to me complain about work?" I hugged her tightly. "We will video chat every week, and you have to visit me. The beaches of Cape Cod are incredible. You'll love them." She wiped her tears and tried to smile. "Promise?" "I promise. This isn't goodbye, Carol. It's just, see you later." The night before our definitive departure for Boston, Sam and I had dinner at home. The last meal we would have there for a long time. The house was practically empty. Most of the furniture had been sold or donated. We kept only a few special pieces that would be shipped to Boston. We sat on the living room floor, eating pizza straight from the box, like we used to on movie nights when Sam was younger. "You know, Mom," he said between bites, "I never imagined our lives would change so much in such a short time." I smiled, thinking how true that was. Just a few months ago, I was desperate, fighting not to lose everything. Now we were about to start a new life on the East Coast. "Life is unpredictable," I replied. Sometimes the worst situations end up leading us down paths we never dreamed of. Like Dad leaving us, Sam said, his voice neutral, stating a fact without the resentment that once dominated him. Yes, it was painful, terrible, but it brought us here. Sam took the last slice of pizza. Do you think we'll adapt there? I think so. It will be different, of course. We'll have to learn a lot of new things, but it will also be exciting. And what are you going to do with the winery and with the other properties? It was a question I had been asking myself. Until a few months ago, my life was managing the house, helping with the company when John allowed it, and taking care of Sam. Now, suddenly, I was a businesswoman with properties in 2 states. I'm going to learn, I replied honestly. I'm going to study, listen to the people who already work there, understand how everything works before making any decisions. Sam nodded, seeming satisfied with my answer. I'm proud of you, Mom. A lot of people would have fallen apart after what Dad did, but you got stronger. His words touched my heart. During the years of marriage, I slowly lost my identity, my confidence. I became John's wife, an accessory in his life. The painful divorce, the fight for my rights, and now this unexpected inheritance forced me to rediscover who I was, what I wanted. Thank you, son. That means a lot to me. We slept on the floor that night, on makeshift mattresses, like campers in our own house. At dawn, the taxi arrived to take us to the airport. I gave one last look at the house where I lived for so many years, where I raised my son, where I laughed and cried. Goodbye, I whispered, closing the door for the last time. The first year in Boston was a period of adjustment and discovery. Boston, with its history and view of the Charles River, became our new home. The apartment in Beacon Hill, which initially seemed so foreign and impressive, gradually transformed into a cozy space full of our own memories. Sam adapted with the characteristic ease of youth. The international school was multicultural, with students from dozens of different countries. In a short time, he had formed a new circle of friends and was learning European history, laughing at the differences between his Texas accent and the New England one. They think we talk singing, he told me one day, imitating the Boston accent with comical exaggeration. For me, the adjustment was more gradual. There were so many things to learn, so many new responsibilities. Robert became my guide in the labyrinth of being a multi-business owner. I hired a financial advisor recommended by him, a Bostonian educated at Harvard named Michael, who had a gift for explaining complex concepts simply and clearly. You have a very solid financial position, Michael explained in our first meeting. The properties are well maintained, the businesses are lucrative, and the investments are diversified. Mr. Anthony had an excellent business sense. Under his guidance, I began to better understand the empire I had inherited. The winery was particularly fascinating. I visited it monthly, spending days learning about viticulture, the winemaking process, the history of the region. Mr. Phillips, initially reserved, gradually opened up, sharing not only his technical knowledge, but also the stories and traditions of Napa. On one of those visits, he took me to a small cellar where they kept special bottles. "This is our treasure," he said, showing rows of dusty bottles. "Some of these vintages are more than 50 years old." I looked at the bottles with reverence, lightly touching their yellowed labels. "Mr. Anthony liked to say that a good wine is like life," Mr. Phillips continued. "It needs time, patience, and sometimes a bit of luck with the weather. But mainly it needs love." Those words stayed with me. Time, patience, luck, love. Wasn't that exactly what I was trying to rebuild? My life, after the storm of divorce, needed those same elements. I started to become more actively involved in the winery's management. Not that I had technical knowledge, that was the job of Mr. Phillips and his team, but I began to think strategically about the business. We hired a digital marketing specialist to expand our online presence. We opened the property for limited tourist visits, offering exclusive tastings. We sponsored cultural events in Boston and New York. Slowly, the brand began to gain more recognition. Sales increased. Mr. Phillips, initially skeptical of my Texas ideas, as he called them, began to look at me with new respect. "You have a business instinct, just like your uncle," he commented one afternoon, as we reviewed the quarterly results. Those words meant more to me than he could imagine. For years, John had excluded me from any decision related to the construction company, insisting that I didn't understand business, that my place was at home. Discovering that I did, in fact, have a talent for management was like reclaiming a part of myself that had been denied for so long. At home, Sam and I established a new routine. We had dinner together every night, sharing the experiences of the day. On weekends, we explored New England, the beaches of Cape Cod, the quaint historical towns, the historical monuments of Boston and its surroundings. It was as if we were discovering the world together, mother and son, partners in this new adventure. The house in Cape Cod became our refuge during school vacations, located in a small cove with direct access to an almost private beach. It was a place of absolute tranquility. Sam loved swimming in the clear sea, exploring the nearby cliffs, or simply relaxing under the summer sun. It was there, on a golden summer afternoon, that he told me he had been accepted to the Boston University School of Architecture. "They loved my portfolio," he said, unable to contain his smile, "especially the drawings I did here on the Cape." I hugged him tightly, my heart overflowing with pride. My son, who had faced his father's rejection, the turbulence of divorce, the move to another state, was flourishing, following his own path. "Does your father know?" I asked gently. Sam shrugged. "I sent him an email. He replied that he's happy for me, but he still thinks medicine would be a safer choice." Typical John, I thought. Always wanting to control, always believing he knew what was best for others. "And you, what do you think?" Sam asked, watching me intently. "I think you should follow what you love," I replied without hesitation. "Life is too short to do something that doesn't make you happy just because it seems safe, or because other people think it's the right thing to do." Sam's smile widened. "That's what I thought you'd say." As I watched my son swim in the sparkling sea, I reflected on how much our lives had changed. The pain we felt, the tears we shed, seemed to belong to another life, another time. It wasn't that I had forgotten. The scar of John's betrayal would always be there, but it no longer hurt the same way. In Boston, my social life also began to flourish. I made friends with other transplants, an American painter, a couple of French chefs, an English writer. Through them, I met local Bostonians and was included in dinners, gallery openings, poetry readings. It was at one of those events, a photography exhibition in a small gallery in the North End, that I met Arthur. Not my great-uncle, but a college professor of literature with graying temples and intelligent blue eyes. He approached when I was looking at a black-and-white photograph of the Charles River during a storm. "It's incredible how the same landscape can look so different depending on the light, isn't it?" he commented. I turned, surprised by the observation. "Are you from New York?" He smiled. "No, I'm from here, but I spent a few years teaching at MIT in Cambridge. I picked up a bit of an accent." We talked for almost an hour, discovering common interests in literature, music, wine. He knew Napa Valley well. His family was originally from California, and he was intrigued when I mentioned the winery. "Menderos, that wine is extraordinary. I'm impressed." At the end of the night, he asked for my phone number. I hesitated momentarily. Since the divorce, I hadn't considered the possibility of meeting someone new. But there was something about Arthur, his kindness, his intelligence without arrogance, the respect with which he treated me, that made me give him a chance. Our first date was lunch at a small restaurant by the river. We talked for hours, discovering more about each other. Arthur was a widower of 5 years, with 2 adult children living in New York. He loved his job as a professor, but dreamed of writing a novel someday. "And you?" he asked. "What brought you to Massachusetts?" I told him a summarized version of my story. The difficult divorce, the unexpected inheritance, the decision to start over in a new state. "That must have been difficult," he commented, his eyes full of genuine understanding. "It was, but it was also liberating. I discovered a strength I didn't know I had." He smiled. "That's evident. You rebuilt your life in a new place. You're managing complex businesses, raising your son alone. That's admirable." I felt my face flush. I wasn't used to sincere compliments. John, in the last years of our marriage, had become a master of veiled criticisms, comments that undermined my confidence so subtly that I barely noticed. Arthur was different. There was an authenticity about him that was refreshing. He wasn't trying to impress. He didn't have a hidden agenda. He was simply himself. A mature man with his own scars and stories, interested in knowing mine. After that lunch, we started seeing each other regularly. Movies, concerts, walks around the city. I took him to see the winery in Napa, where he talked animatedly with Mr. Phillips about old vintages. I introduced him to Sam, who initially showed expected caution, but was soon charmed by Arthur's simple nature and his encyclopedic knowledge of American architecture. 6 months after meeting, Arthur invited me for a weekend in Concord, a charming town outside Boston, known for its literary history and mysterious forests. We stayed at a historic inn overlooking the mountains. On the first night, after a candlelight dinner, he took my hand across the table. "Laura, I need to tell you something." My heart quickened. For a moment, the old fear surfaced. Would it be another rejection, another abandonment? "I'm in love with you," he said simply. "I didn't expect this to happen again in my life. After Martha died, I thought that part of me had died too. But you..." He paused, searching for the right words. "You brought the light back." I felt tears in my eyes, not of sadness, but of a happiness that almost hurt. "I'm in love with you too," I replied, my voice almost a whisper. That night, under the New England stars, I felt as if a cycle had completed. The abandonment, the pain, the struggle. Everything had led me there, to that moment of unexpected happiness. When we returned to Boston, I told Sam about the development of my relationship with Arthur. We sat on the balcony of our apartment, watching the sun set over the Charles. "Are you happy, Mom?" he asked after hearing my confession. "Yes," I replied honestly, "very happy." He smiled, that smile that illuminated his entire face. "Then I'm happy for you. Arthur is a great guy, and you deserve someone like him." "Like me?" "Yes, strong, intelligent, resilient. You know, after everything we went through, you could have become bitter, distrustful. But you didn't. You stayed open to life, to possibilities. That's incredible." I looked at my son with admiration. When had he become so wise, so understanding? "Do you think it's too soon?" I asked, unsure. "After your father..." Sam shook his head. "Mom, you spent years unhappy with Dad, even before he left. Now you found someone who makes you happy. Why wait?" I hugged him, grateful for having such a mature and generous son. 2 years passed since we moved to Boston. Boston was no longer a foreign city to us, but a home. We knew its secret corners, its hidden cafes, its traditions. The local dialect no longer sounded strange to our ears, although we proudly maintained our Texas accent. Sam was in his sophomore year of architecture school, excelling in his studies. He had even interned at a prestigious architectural firm over the summer, where his talent for drawing and his creative vision were quickly noticed. My relationship with Arthur flourished. He had become a constant presence in our lives, a partner in the truest sense of the word. We didn't live together. We both valued our individual spaces, but we spent most nights and weekends together. The winery prospered under my renewed management. We had launched a new line of wines that received enthusiastic reviews and significantly increased our international sales. Even Mr. Phillips, traditionalist as he was, recognized the value of the changes we implemented. On an autumn afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Amanda, my lawyer in Austin. "Laura, I hope everything is well with you and Sam in Boston. I have news you should know. Smith Construction is facing serious financial difficulties. According to reports from the manager you hired, John made a series of risky investments that didn't pan out. The company is on the brink of bankruptcy. John tried to sell your share, the 40% you hold, without your authorization, but was legally prevented. Now he's desperate for capital to save the business. I thought you should know before he tries to contact you directly. Amanda." I stared at the screen, stunned. Smith Construction, the business I helped build from the start, which represented years of my life, was about to collapse. I didn't feel joy at the news, as perhaps the John of 2 years ago would have expected. I didn't feel satisfaction in knowing he was failing without me. I felt only a deep sadness for all the waste, of effort, of potential, of shared dreams. As Amanda predicted, John's email arrived the next day. The tone was desperate, almost pleading, something I never imagined coming from the arrogant man who humiliated me in the courtroom. "Laura, I hope this email finds you well. I imagine Amanda has already informed you about the company's situation. We are facing an unprecedented crisis due to some investments that didn't yield the expected return. I need your help. With your share of the company as collateral, we can secure the necessary financing to overcome this difficult moment. Please, consider this not just for our past together, but for the future of the company we built together. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, after everything, but I'm begging you, not for me, but for the employees who depend on these jobs, for the clients who trusted us, for the legacy we built. John." I showed the email to Arthur that night, while having dinner at his apartment. He listened attentively, without interrupting, as I explained the history of the construction company, how much I had invested in it in the early years, how important that business had been to me. "What do you want to do?" he asked finally. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to let it sink. It would be fair, after how he treated me. But another part? Another part of you still cares about the business," he completed softly. I nodded. "Not for John, but for the construction company, for the people who work there, for what it represents." Arthur thought for a moment. "You could fly to Austin, see the situation for yourself before making any decision." The idea of returning to Austin, of facing John face to face after so long, was terrifying, but it also made sense. I couldn't make a decision of that magnitude remotely, based only on emails. The next morning I booked a flight to Austin. Sam insisted on coming with me. "Are you sure?" I asked as we prepared. "It's going to be uncomfortable." "Absolutely," he replied with determination. "I'm not going to let you face Dad alone." When we arrived at the construction company's headquarters, the imposing building in the business center that was once a source of so much pride, I immediately noticed the differences. The entrance garden was neglected. The receptionist seemed stressed. The traffic was minimal. The walls that once sported photos of major projects now seemed bare. The entire atmosphere was charged with a kind of silent defeat. Amanda met us in the lobby. We went up together to the top-floor meeting room, where John was already waiting for us. When I saw him, I almost didn't recognize him. The man who had been the center of my universe for so many years seemed to have shrunk. His hair was thinner, gray at the temples. Deep lines marked his face. His eyes, once lively and confident, seemed dull, tired. He stood up when we entered, his gaze moving anxiously between me and Sam. "Laura," his voice was hoarse. "Sam, thank you for coming." The meeting was tense, charged with unsaid emotions. John explained the financial situation, essentially the same thing Amanda had already shown me, just with a layer of excuses and justifications. He spoke of the investments that went wrong, the hasty decisions, the missed opportunities. He didn't mention drinking, but I could smell a slight hint of alcohol even at that hour of the morning. His hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages of the presentation. "What exactly do you want from me, John?" I asked finally when he finished his explanation. He took a deep breath. "I need you to invest in the company, or use your share as collateral for a substantial loan. Without that, we will have to file for bankruptcy in less than 3 months." "And why would I do that?" "Because despite everything, this company is also your creation. You were there from the start, Laura. Do you remember when you sold your grandmother's earrings for our first venture? When you worked late doing the accounting?" I was surprised he remembered those details he had vehemently denied during our divorce. "Curious," I commented, keeping my voice neutral. "In the courtroom, you said I never contributed anything, that everything was the exclusive result of your labor." He had the decency to look ashamed. "I was wrong. I was cruel and unfair to you. I said terrible things that weren't true." "Like take your son and go to hell," Sam intervened, his voice icy. John looked at our son, the pain evident in his eyes. "Sam, I'm sorry. More than I can express. I was beside myself that day." "You've been beside yourself for the last 3 years," Sam replied. "Before that, you were just pretending to be a father." Amanda placed a hand on my arm, a silent reminder to maintain focus. I nodded subtly. "I'm going to need more information before making any decision," I said, returning to the topic. "I want to see all the books, all the contracts, talk to the key managers, and I need to know what steps you have taken to resolve the situation on your own." John seemed momentarily disconcerted by my direct approach, but nodded. "Of course, anything you want. I have a team ready to give you full access." I spent the next 3 days immersed in the construction company's business, working 12 to 14 hours a day. I reviewed every aspect of the operation, interviewed key employees, visited ongoing projects. Sam accompanied me on some of those visits, his perspective as an architecture student surprisingly valuable. The picture that emerged was bleak, but not irreversible. The construction company had solid projects underway, a good reputation with certain loyal clients, and a core team that was still competent, though demotivated. The main problem was John, his erratic leadership, his impulsive decisions, his growing alcoholism. On the evening of the 3rd day, I sat with Sam and Amanda on Carol's patio, discussing my options. "You don't owe him anything," Amanda insisted. "After how he treated you, it would be perfectly understandable to let the company sink." "But it's not just John and his ego at stake," I argued. "It's dozens of families who depend on those jobs, projects that affect entire communities." Sam, who had remained silent, finally spoke. "You've already made your decision, haven't you?" I looked at my son, surprised by his insight. "I think so." He smiled. "I knew you would do that, not because you're weak or because you still care about Dad, but because you are who you are, someone who cares about others, who builds instead of destroys." The next day, I called a meeting with John and the company's board of directors. I arrived early, prepared, confident in a way that would never have been possible 2 years before. When everyone was present, I laid out my proposal. I am willing to make a substantial investment in the construction company using part of the resources I have in Boston. In exchange, I want 70% of the shares and full control of the operation. A shocked silence followed my words. John seemed stunned. That means, I continued, that you, John, will remain as a minority shareholder, but you will step down from executive management. I will form a new board of directors and implement a complete restructuring. You want to kick me out of my own company? John asked incredulously. Out of our company? I corrected gently. And yes, out of executive management. You will continue to receive dividends when the company is profitable again, and you can retain an honorary position if you wish, but operational decisions will no longer go through you. The other directors looked at each other, clearly evaluating the proposal. It was no secret to anyone that John had become a problem for the company. Why would you do this? John asked, his voice almost a whisper. Why not just let everything end? Because unlike you, I never stopped believing in what we built, I replied honestly. And because there are good people who depend on these jobs. There was a long pause as John absorbed my words. Finally, he spoke. I need to think about it. You have until tomorrow, I replied, standing up. The offer will not be open indefinitely. I left the meeting room feeling strangely light. Regardless of John's decision, I had made mine, not out of revenge or resentment, but out of a genuine desire to preserve something valuable. Sam was waiting for me in the building's lobby. How did it go? He asked anxiously. We'll see tomorrow, I replied. But whatever his decision, I'm at peace with mine. We spent the rest of the day revisiting places that had been important in our previous lives. The park where Sam learned to ride his bike, the ice cream parlor we frequented on Sundays, the school where he studied. It was like a farewell, a final tribute to memories that, although important, no longer defined us. The next morning, I received an email from John. Laura, I accept your terms. You were always better at this than me anyway. The company is yours to save or transform as you see fit. John. Just like that. The empire he had protected so fiercely, for which he had sacrificed our marriage, now surrendered with a silent admission of defeat. Amanda helped with the necessary paperwork. In a week, I was officially the majority shareholder and CEO of Smith Construction. I immediately began implementing changes. I brought back key employees who had been dismissed. I canceled unviable projects. I focused on areas where we had proven expertise. John kept his word and stepped away. I heard from employees that he had finally sought help for his alcoholism, entering a rehabilitation clinic outside the city. Before returning to Boston, I went to visit him at the clinic. It was a quiet place, surrounded by well-maintained gardens. John looked different, thinner, paler, but with clearer eyes than they had been at our first encounter. Thanks for coming, he said when we sat down on a garden bench. How are you? I asked, genuinely interested. Surviving one day at a time, as they say around here. He paused, looking toward the distant hills. You know, for a long time, I believed that success was the only thing that mattered, that if I had enough money, enough power, enough respect, I would be happy. And you weren't? He shook his head sadly. The more I got, the emptier I felt. I tried to fill that void with Sophie, with parties, with drinking. Nothing worked. I remained silent, letting him continue. Seeing you and Sam now, how you are doing well, how you rebuilt your lives without me, made me realize how much I threw away. Not just the marriage, but the opportunity to watch my son grow, to build something that would last beyond money or status. There was a sincerity in his words that moved me, not enough to change my feelings for him, not enough to erase the past, but enough to feel a kind of peace. It's never too late to start over, John, I said finally. Sam is still your son. If you truly change, if you truly want to be part of his life, maybe someday it will be possible. Not now, not immediately, but someday. He nodded, his eyes glistening with contained tears. It's more than I deserve. We said goodbye with a brief handshake. Not as bitter ex-spouses, nor as reconciled friends, but as two people who finally found a way to peace with a shared past. The flight back to Boston was quiet, both Sam and I absorbed in our own thoughts. The visit to Austin had stirred something within us, not regret, not nostalgia, but a kind of closure, as if the last piece of a puzzle had finally found its place, completing an image that we could now fully appreciate. Arthur was waiting for us at the Boston airport, his face lighting up when he saw us. He hugged Sam warmly and then enveloped me in his arms, kissing me softly. "Welcome back," he said, taking our suitcases. "I missed you." On the way home, we told him about our trip, the situation of the construction company, my decision to take control, the meeting with John at the clinic. Arthur listened attentively, without judgment, offering only support and understanding. "You did what you believed was right," he commented when I finished. "That's what matters." In the following days, I immersed myself again in my life in Boston, now with the added responsibility of managing the construction company in Austin. Thanks to technology, I could do much of the work remotely, with occasional visits scheduled every few months. I hired a local operating CEO, a brilliant woman named Rachel, who had been fired by John years before and who brought with her renewed energy and innovative ideas. Under her direct leadership and my strategic guidance, the construction company slowly began to recover. The winery in Napa Valley continued to prosper. We had just won a major award in an international wine competition, further increasing our visibility in the global market. Sam was flourishing in his architecture studies, already being recognized by professors and colleagues for his exceptional talent. He had begun designing a small renovation project for the winery office, his first real commission, even if it was a commission from his own mother. My relationship with Arthur deepened. He had become not only my romantic partner, but my confidant, my best friend. Our lives intertwined naturally, without haste, without pressure. On a sunny spring afternoon, we were walking on the beach near the house on Cape Cod, where we were spending a long weekend. The sea was calm, a deep blue that seemed to merge with the sky on the horizon. "I've been thinking," Arthur began, taking my hand as we walked barefoot on the sand, "about the future." "What kind of thoughts?" I asked, feeling a slight apprehension. Even after 2 years together, a part of me still feared losing the happiness I had found. He stopped, turning to look at me with those blue eyes that already knew every corner of my soul. "I would like to spend the rest of my life with you, Laura. Not necessarily married unless you want to, but together. Maybe in this house which you love so much. Maybe traveling the world when I retire. Maybe just sitting side by side, reading in silence on winter nights." I felt tears forming in my eyes, not of sadness, but of a happiness so deep it almost hurt. "I want that too," I replied, my voice choked with emotion. He smiled, that smile that still made my heart race. "Then it's decided." There was no formal proposal. There was no ring. We didn't need those formalities. We were two adults who had lived long enough to know what truly mattered. The following week, I told Sam about our decision to live together. We were at the small coffee shop near the university where we used to meet for lunch once a week. "Arthur and I are thinking of sharing a house," I said, watching his reaction carefully. Sam smiled. That smile that illuminated his entire face and reminded me of the child he had been. "It's about time, don't you think? You practically live together anyway. Are you okay with that?" He put his hand over mine. "Mom, I'm 20 years old. I'm in college. I'll have my own apartment soon. I want you to be happy. Arthur is an incredible guy. You deserve him." I felt my heart overflow with love for this young man I had raised, so different from his father in so many important ways. "You know there will always be room for you in our house, no matter where it is, right?" "Of course I know that." he replied with a confidence that moved me. "But I think it will do you good to have your own space, your own life." We decided that the house on Cape Cod would be our main home. Arthur was already planning to retire from the university at the end of the academic year, and I could manage my businesses from anywhere. We would keep the apartment in Boston for when we needed to be in the city, for my meetings or to visit Sam. Sam himself was excited about the prospect of having the Boston apartment more to himself, although he knew he would always be welcome on the Cape. Life had reached a balance I never imagined possible in the dark days after John left me. I was financially independent, emotionally fulfilled, surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not for what they could get from me. One afternoon, while working in my office at the Cape Cod house, I received an unexpected email from John. "Laura, I hope everything is well with you and Sam in Boston. Things here are gradually improving. I completed the rehabilitation program and have been sober for 6 months. One day at a time, as they say. The construction company is unrecognizable in the best possible way. Rachel has done an exceptional job, and your strategic guidelines have been spot on. The employees are motivated again. The market reputation is recovering. I'm writing because I finally understood something you tried to show me years ago, that companies are made of people, not just numbers and contracts. That relationships matter more than status. That integrity is worth more than appearances. I never adequately thanked you for saving the company when you could have simply let me sink. It was an act of generosity that I didn't deserve, but for which I will be eternally grateful. I also wanted to say that if Sam ever wants to reconnect with me, I'm here. I understand he needs time, maybe forever, and I will respect his decision, whatever it may be. I wish you all the happiness in the world. John." I read the email several times, feeling a strange mix of emotions. There was no longer rage, no longer resentment, only a kind of melancholy for what could have been, for the lost years, for the wrong choices. I showed the email to Sam when he came to visit us for the weekend. He read it in silence, his face impassive. "What do you think?" I asked softly when he finished. He thought for a moment. It seemed sincere. "Do you want to reply? Or perhaps meet him when we go to Austin next time?" Sam looked at the sea through the window, thoughtful. "I don't know yet. Maybe someday. But not now. I'm not ready." "That's okay," I replied, hugging him. "There's no rush. You decide when and if you want to reconnect." As I watched my son walk on the beach that afternoon, I thought about how unpredictable life was, how John's harsh words in the courtroom, "Take your son out of here and go to hell," had, ironically, opened the way to a life much richer and fuller than the one we had before. It's not that we hadn't suffered. We suffered intensely. It's not that we hadn't faced challenges. We faced many. But we emerged stronger, more complete, more authentic. That night, as Arthur and I drank wine on the terrace, watching the sky transform into a spectacle of colors at sunset, I felt a deep peace. Not the peace of someone who never faced storms, but of someone who learned to sail through them and found a safe harbor. "What are you thinking about?" Arthur asked, noticing my contemplative silence. "About how life takes us down unexpected paths," I replied. "About how sometimes we need to lose something to find something better." He nodded, understanding without me needing to explain more. It was one of the things I loved most about him, his ability to understand the silences between my words. "Do you know what I think?" he said, refilling our glasses with the award-winning red wine from our winery. "I think you were never truly lost, just temporarily disoriented." I smiled, reflecting on his words. Maybe he was right. Maybe, even in the darkest moments, when John humiliated me in the courtroom, when I fought not to lose everything, a part of me already knew I would find my way back, not to what I was before, but to something new, something better. To you, I toasted, raising my glass, for helping me find my direction. To us, he gently corrected, for sailing together from here on out. As the sun disappeared on the horizon, I thought of all the people who had helped me get there. Sam, with his quiet strength and unwavering loyalty. Carol, with her unconditional friendship. Amanda, with her fierce determination. Robert, with his kindness and guidance. Uncle Anthony, with his unexpected and transformative legacy. And yes, even John, whose actions, though painful, forced me to rediscover my own strength, my own identity. The courtroom had fallen silent that day, so long ago, when the judge revealed my unexpected inheritance. But the true silence, the silence of inner peace, of self-knowledge, of acceptance, I only found that much later, on the beaches of Cape Cod, in the vineyards of Napa Valley, on the streets of Boston. And in that silence, I finally heard my own voice, clear, confident, true. Now, if you liked this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments what part left you speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos that I don't publish here. I'll see you there.